Hey guys, tonight we are taking a journey, not to a serene national park like Yosemite or the bustling streets of a modern metropolis, but across vast stretches of time and unforgiving terrain, to ancient China. We're going to talk about one of humanity's most colossal achievements, a structure so immense it can supposedly be seen from space, the Great Wall of China. You might picture majestic, ancient stones winding gracefully over verdant hillsides, a symbol of strength and timeless beauty. And while it is certainly awe inspiring, the reality for the millions who built it was anything but glorious. You'll quickly discover that if you were one of the laborers on the Great Wall, you probably wouldn't have survived the first brutal season. Seriously, forget your climate controlled construction sites, your safety harnesses, or your 8-hour shifts. This was a monumental undertaking built on unimaginable suffering, forced labor, and an indifferent disregard for human life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself not as a tourist gazing up at the magnificent ramparts, but as a conscript, perhaps a peasant farmer or a captured prisoner, dragged from your distant village in what might today be Kansas or Nebraska, forced to labor on a project of unimaginable scale. This isn't a job you applied for. It's a brutal imperial decree, a sentence that could last for years or for the remainder of your short, miserable life. Your journey to the wall itself is often a death march, hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles on foot, shackled with other laborers, enduring hunger, thirst, and the biting winds of the northern plains or the scorching sun of the arid plateaus. Many would perish before they even laid eyes on the construction sites, their bodies left by the roadside, a grim foretaste of what awaited. The very concept of the Great Wall was born from imperial ambition and relentless fear. Emperors, particularly Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor to truly unify China, envisioned a colossal barrier to protect their nascent empire from the fierce nomadic tribes of the north, particularly the Xiongnu. It wasn't just about defense, it was about solidifying power, projecting an image of unshakable authority, and enforcing a unified vision. You are a mere cog in this immense machine, your individual life utterly insignificant in the face of such grand, despotic designs. Imagine a president today deciding to build a wall spanning half the continent, using forced labor and expecting millions to simply die for the project. That's the scale of the ambition you are now part of. The emperor's decrees were absolute, backed by the full might of his military and administrative apparatus. There was no appeal, no escape. If you were conscripted, you went. If you resisted, your family paid the price. This wasn't voluntary servitude. It was a ruthless system of forced labor, drawing from every corner of the vast empire. Farmers, scholars, criminals, soldiers, all were swept into the maw of this colossal project. Your identity as a free individual vanishes the moment you are pressed into service, replaced by a number, a statistic in a brutal imperial ledger. This profound loss of autonomy, this complete subjugation of your will, would be a crushing blow to your spirit, even before the physical suffering began. Upon arrival at the construction site, you are immediately plunged into a scene of chaotic, brutal efficiency. The sheer number of laborers is overwhelming. Tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, spread along vast stretches of desolate mountains and arid plains. The air is thick with dust, the clang of hammers, the shouts of overseers, and the groans of exhausted men. This isn't an organized work camp with modern amenities. It's a rudimentary, temporary settlement, often with no proper shelters, sanitation, or medical facilities. You might find yourself sleeping exposed to the elements or crammed into a makeshift lean-to with dozens of other conscripts. The ground your bed, a tattered piece of cloth your only blanket. The supervision is ruthless and omnipresent. Imperial overseers, often former soldiers or corrupt officials, rule with an iron fist. Their authority is absolute, their methods brutal. They carry whips, cudgels, and often the silent threat of a sword. Their primary goal is to ensure maximum output, to keep the bricks moving, the earth compacted, and the sections rising, regardless of the human cost. There's no compassion, no leniency for exhaustion or illness. One moment of perceived slacking, one stumble, and you could face a public beating, a reduction in already meager rations, or even death. This constant, pervasive fear of punishment would be a relentless psychological burden, far heavier than any stone you lifted. Historians widely cite the brutal discipline as a key factor in the high mortality rates among wall builders. The sheer scale of the undertaking is mind boggling. You're not just building a wall, you're carving a monument out of raw earth and rock, stretching for thousands of miles across some of the most inhospitable terrains imaginable. This isn't about engineering finesse, it's about brute force, applied relentlessly, day after day, year after year. The emperor's dream of an impregnable barrier becomes your waking nightmare, a concrete manifestation of unyielding imperial will, built on the sweat, blood, and broken bones of countless anonymous lives. And for you, trapped within this system, there is no end in sight, only the grim horizon of another endless day of toil. The early sections of the wall, particularly during the Qin dynasty, were often built using rammed earth and loose stone, then later refined with brick and mortar. Imagine the sheer physicality of this work. You're hauling heavy baskets of earth, packed tightly into wooden frames, then ramming it down with heavy mallets, compacting it layer by painstaking layer, or you're quarrying massive stones, prying them from the earth with primitive tools, then painstakingly moving them to the construction site. There are no cranes, no bulldozers, no hydraulic lifts. Every ounce of material, every single brick, every massive stone is moved by human muscle, pure, unadulterated strength, stretched beyond its breaking point. This relentless physical exertion, from dawn till dusk, would quickly wear down even the strongest bodies, leaving you perpetually aching, your muscles screaming in protest. And for what to protect an empire that views you as expendable? The irony is lost on no one, particularly not on the exhausted laborers. The wall, built to keep out invaders, became a monstrous prison for those forced to construct it, a monument to human suffering disguised as imperial might. Its very existence is a testament to the brutal efficiency of a system that valued its own continuation far above the lives of the individuals who powered its grandest ambitions. You are a living sacrifice, your body and spirit offered up to the insatiable appetite of an imperial dream. Last night, we stepped into the brutal reality of forced labor on the Great Wall, glimpsing the sheer imperial ambition and the crushing fear that drove millions to their doom. Tonight, let's confront the land's relentless fury, the utterly unforgiving terrains and extreme climates that the builders faced daily, turning every step, every breath, into a desperate battle against nature itself. Because while the threat of invaders was external, the immediate, inescapable enemy was often the very ground beneath their feet and the sky above their heads. You're a conscript, dragged to a section of the wall, perhaps high in the Yanshan Mountains in what is now Hebei province, or stretching across the arid plateaus near Gansu. This isn't a gentle stroll through a manicured park. The wall winds its way through some of the most geographically challenging landscapes in China. Imagine yourself clinging to a steep mountainside, the wind howling around you, threatening to rip your flimsy clothing and send you plummeting thousands of feet below. You're trying to haul massive stones up jagged slopes with no modern safety equipment, no sturdy ropes, just primitive wooden levers and the sheer force of desperate human muscle. The rocks beneath your feet are loose, the ascent treacherous, and a single misstep could mean a broken bone, a skull fracture, or a fatal fall, your body tumbling down the precipice, lost to the indifferent landscape. Then consider the extreme climate variations. The northern frontier of China, where the wall primarily lies, experiences brutal extremes. In winter, imagine yourself battling bone chilling cold. Temperatures could plummet far below freezing, with relentless, icy winds whipping across the exposed mountain ridges and open plains. You're likely dressed in thin, inadequate clothing, huddling with other shivering laborers, trying to extract warmth from a meager fire of scavenged brush. Your hands, raw and cracked, would quickly become frostbitten. Fingers and toes would blacken and die, leading to agonizing amputations or crippling disabilities. The risk of hypothermia was constant, turning sleep into a gamble with death. Many simply froze to death where they stood or lay, their bodies becoming part of the frozen landscape, grim monuments to the wall's insatiable appetite. Historians have found evidence of simple, open-air encampments in incredibly harsh winter locations, suggesting little protection for the laborers. But the cold was only half the story. When summer arrived, it brought scorching, relentless heat. Imagine working under a blazing sun, the dry air sucking the moisture from your body, the stone and earth radiating heat that would cook you from the inside out. Dehydration would be a constant, debilitating threat. Water sources were often scarce, and what little was available might be contaminated. You'd be battling heat stroke, your head pounding, your vision blurring, your muscles cramping, all while being forced to continue hauling stones or ramming earth. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning your skin to cracked leather and promising no respite until dusk, only for the cycle of exhaustion to begin anew the next dawn. The lack of water was a particularly insidious killer. Building across vast, arid regions meant that water had to be transported, often over long distances, by human or animal power. Imagine the desperation of thirst, your throat parched, your lips cracked, your body screaming for hydration that simply wasn't available in sufficient quantities. Water rationing would be strict, and contaminated sources could lead to rampant dysentery or other waterborne diseases, further debilitating the workforce. This was a land that could swallow lives through its very dryness. And then there's the terrain itself, beyond the mountains. The wall also traversed vast deserts, shifting sands, and open steppes. Imagine digging foundations in loose, unpredictable sand that constantly shifted beneath your feet, or trying to transport materials across endless, barren stretches where every step was an effort. The landscape offered no shelter, no natural resources, only a formidable challenge. The sheer logistical nightmare of supplying millions of laborers across thousands of miles of such varied and hostile terrain contributed immensely to the suffering and mortality. It's a detail that often gets overlooked in the majestic images of the wall, but for the builders, the very ground they worked on was an enemy. The omnipresent dust and grit were also silent tormentors, whether from the dry earth, the constant quarrying of stone, or the pounding of rammed earth. The air was perpetually thick with fine particles. You'd be inhaling this dust with every breath, coating your lungs, irritating your eyes, and contributing to chronic respiratory illnesses. Your skin would be perpetually grimy, your hair matted with dirt, and the grit would work its way into every cut and abrasion, leading to infections. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was a slow, insidious assault on your internal organs, leading to conditions like silicosis, a severe lung disease from inhaling crystalline silica dust, often found in construction work. This would leave you coughing, wheezing, and slowly suffocating, even if you managed to avoid other perils. The wildlife of these remote regions offered further threats. While perhaps less of a concern than hunger or disease, you would contend with venomous snakes, scorpions, and large predators. Sleeping exposed to the elements meant constant vigilance, adding another layer of anxiety to an already stressful existence. And then there were the countless insects, flies, mosquitoes, fleas, that thrived in unsanitary conditions, carrying diseases and making sleep a restless, itchy torment. This relentless environmental assault meant that the builders were not just fighting against the challenges of construction, they were fighting against the very planet. The mountains, deserts, and extreme climates became active participants in their misery, claiming lives with cold, heat, thirst, and the sheer unforgiving nature of the land. The Great Wall stands today as a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance, but also as a stark monument to the brutal indifference of nature and the utter disregard for human life that defined its construction. The beauty we see now, stretching across the landscape, masks the raw, agonizing struggle that was embedded in every stone. Last night, we battled the relentless fury of the land, understanding how the extreme climates and unforgiving terrains became active tormentors for the great wall builders. Tonight, let's confront the core of their misery, the toil beyond endurance, witnessing the relentless, back-breaking physical demands that systematically broke their bodies and spirits, turning every waking moment into a struggle against collapse. Because while the elements were harsh, it was the unceasing, brutal labor that was the true, silent killer. You're a conscript, perhaps a farmer named Lee from a village now hundreds of miles away, or a scholar named Chen, whose hands were once accustomed to brushes, not chisels. Your day begins long before dawn, roused by the harsh shouts of the overseers, often accompanied by the crack of a whip. There are no gentle alarms, no leisurely stretching. You're immediately thrust into a grueling routine that lasts until darkness or beyond, often only halted by utter physical collapse. Imagine your muscles screaming in protest before the sun has even thought about rising, knowing the entire day will be a marathon of agony. The work itself is a testament to raw, unadulterated human power. There are no machines, no animal assistance for many tasks, especially in the treacherous mountain sections. Every single stone, every basket of earth, every bucket of water is moved by human muscle. You might be tasked with quarrying stone deep in the mountains. This means hacking away at solid rock with primitive iron tools, chisels, and hammers. Your body straining, sweat pouring into your eyes, the clang of metal on stone echoing endlessly. Imagine chipping away at a massive boulder, knowing that a single piece could weigh more than you do, and that you'll have to move it. This isn't just physically taxing, it's mentally exhausting. Knowing the sheer scale of what lies ahead, once quarried, the stones, often massive, irregular blocks, need to be transported. There are no paved roads, no wheeled vehicles capable of navigating the steep, narrow mountain paths. Instead, you'll be part of a human chain, hauling them. Imagine yourself strapped to a heavy stone, pulling it uphill with thick ropes made of hemp or bamboo, your bare feet slipping on loose scree, or perhaps you're one of a dozen men, straining against a wooden lever, slowly, agonizingly inching a colossal block forward, inch by painful inch. The constant friction of ropes against your shoulders, the splinters in your hands, the burning in your lungs. It's a living nightmare. And the risk of injury is immense. A dropped stone, a snapped rope, a sudden slip, and someone is crushed, maimed, or killed instantly. There's no emergency response, just a crude burial and another body added to the wall's grim foundations. Historians still marvel at the sheer scale of manual labor involved, often under conditions that defied belief. If you're not hauling stone, you might be involved in rammed earth construction, especially in the flatter, more expansive sections. This involves meticulously packing layers of loose earth and gravel into wooden frames, then compacting them with heavy, handheld mallets. Imagine pounding a heavy mallet for hours, the rhythmic thudding echoing across the plains, each impact sending vibrations through your entire body. Your arms would ache, your shoulders would burn, and the dust kicked up by the pounding would constantly coat your lungs. This work, seemingly simple, requires immense repetitive force, leading to chronic joint pain, back injuries, and pervasive fatigue. The workday is mercilessly long, stretching from the first light of dawn until long after dusk. There are no defined shifts, no breaks beyond a hasty meal. You work until you physically can't, or until the overseer deems you've done enough, which is rarely before utter exhaustion sets in. Imagine the sun setting, your body screaming for rest, but the lanterns are lit, and the work continues. Sleep, when it finally comes, is a brief, often disturbed respite, offering barely enough recovery before the brutal cycle begins anew. This constant, severe sleep deprivation would lead to impaired judgment, increased accidents, and a perpetual state of foggy exhaustion, further contributing to the already high mortality rates. The sheer physical toll on your body is unimaginable. Your hands would be raw, blistered, and calloused, often bleeding from cuts and scrapes that would quickly fester in the unsanitary conditions. Your shoulders would be permanently hunched, your back aching with chronic pain from years of heavy lifting and stooping. Your knees and joints would be swollen and inflamed, giving out under the constant strain. You would suffer from pulled muscles, sprains, and minor fractures that would go untreated, leading to permanent deformities and crippling disabilities. Your body, once strong and capable, would be systematically broken down, piece by painful piece, until you were no longer capable of labor. This wasn't just arduous work, it was a form of slow motion destruction. Beyond the physical, consider the psychological torment of this relentless toil. There's no sense of accomplishment, no pride in your work. You are building a monument for an emperor who cares nothing for your life. Every brick, every stone, every rammed earth layer is a reminder of your servitude, your stolen freedom, and your impending doom. The endlessness of the task, the constant fear of punishment, and the brutal indifference of the overseers would crush your spirit, leaving you devoid of hope. This psychological burden, the feeling of being a disposable tool rather than a human being, would contribute significantly to the high rates of death from despair and suicide. The Great Wall was not built by innovation or advanced machinery, but by the raw, unyielding force of forced human labor. It was a monument to imperial will, forged from the collective agony of millions. Every stone, every segment, holds the silent screams of those who toiled beyond their endurance, their lives a miserable tribute to one of history's most ambitious and brutal construction projects. The beauty we see today is stained with the sweat, blood, and tears of countless forgotten individuals, a chilling reminder of the dark side of monumental human achievement. Last night, we bore witness to the relentless physical toil that systematically broke the bodies and spirits of the great wall builders. Tonight, let's explore an even more insidious, pervasive torment hunger's gnawing grip, the constant, debilitating struggle for meager food in a landscape of scarcity, turning every waking moment into a desperate quest for sustenance. Because while whips and rocks might break bones, an empty stomach slowly, agonizingly, broke the will to live. You are a laborer, your body already screaming from the previous day's exertions. And the first thing you notice upon waking is the profound emptiness in your belly. This isn't just a fleeting hunger pang, it's a deep, continuous ache, a chronic state of malnutrition that impacts every cell of your body. Your energy levels are dangerously low, your mind foggy with exhaustion, and your body struggles to generate the warmth needed to endure the biting cold. This constant deficit fundamentally shaped their daily existence, turning every task into an arduous feat. Imagine your meal, if you could even call it that. Rations were minimal, often barely enough to sustain life, let alone fuel the monumental labor demanded of you. Your primary sustenance would likely be coarse grains like millet or sorghum, boiled into a thin gruel, or perhaps baked into hard, dry cakes. Meat was a rare luxury, reserved for overseers or perhaps only seen during special occasions. Vegetables, if any, would be wild greens, scavenged from the unforgiving landscape, or whatever meager crops could be grown in temporary, often infertile, plots near the construction sites. This diet was monotonously bland, critically lacking in essential proteins, fats, and vitamins. You ate what you were given, quickly, before the next brutal shift began. The quality and consistency of these meager rations were also highly unreliable. Supply lines stretching thousands of miles across harsh terrain were incredibly vulnerable. Bad weather, banditry, or simply bureaucratic inefficiency could mean that food shipments were delayed or failed to arrive altogether. Imagine the desperation as days stretch into weeks with dwindling provisions, your stomach roaring, your body weakening with every passing hour. Starvation was not an abstract fear, it was a constant, tangible threat, a silent reaper that claimed countless lives alongside the more dramatic dangers. Historians widely cite starvation and malnutrition as leading causes of death among the wall builders, often surpassing direct combat or accidents. And then there was the water. Building across vast, often arid regions meant that clean drinking water was a precious commodity. Water had to be sourced from distant wells, sometimes carried for miles by human chains, or drawn from potentially contaminated rivers or stagnant pools. Imagine the agony of thirst, your throat parched, your lips cracked, your body screaming for hydration that simply wasn't available in sufficient quantities. Water rationing would be strict, leading to constant dehydration. Contaminated water sources could also lead to rampant diarrheal diseases like dysentery, further depleting already malnourished bodies and accelerating the inevitable decline. This combination of food and water scarcity created a vicious cycle of weakness and vulnerability. The psychological impact of chronic hunger was profound. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was a constant mental preoccupation. Your mind would be perpetually consumed with thoughts of food, with the desperate hope for another meal, another morsel. This fixation on survival would override any capacity for rest, for social interaction, or for any shred of joy. It would breed a deep-seated anxiety about scarcity, a primal fear that the next meal might not come, instilling a survival instinct that would endure long after the immediate hunger had passed. Trust would erode, replaced by suspicion as men competed for every scrap, every drop of water. You might find yourself staring at your fellow laborers, not as comrades, but as potential competitors for the next ration. Furthermore, malnutrition had profound and visible physical consequences. Children and younger adults, still developing, would suffer from stunted growth. Their bones would be weak and brittle, prone to fractures and deformities. Vitamin deficiencies would lead to conditions like scurvy, causing bleeding gums, muscle pain, and extreme fatigue, and night blindness, making night work even more perilous. Anemia, caused by iron deficiency, led to extreme weakness, dizziness, and pale complexions, making children and adults alike even more susceptible to disease and injury. The vibrant, energetic spirit of youth was literally starved out of them, leaving them frail, sickly, and prematurely aged, their bodies living testaments to the harsh realities of their diets. The lack of consistent, wholesome food also made the laborers incredibly susceptible to disease. A weakened immune system, which relies on proper nutrition, was a luxury these workers simply couldn't afford. A simple cold could quickly escalate into a life-threatening respiratory infection. A minor cut or abrasion, which would normally heal, could fester and become gangrenous due to the body's inability to fight off infection, leading to agonizing amputations or death. They lived in a constant state of biological vulnerability, their bodies too depleted to fight off the relentless onslaught of pathogens that thrived in the unsanitary camp conditions. Historians have observed that periods of intense wall construction often coincided with spikes in local disease outbreaks, directly linked to the immense concentration of malnourished laborers. This pervasive hunger and deprivation stripped away any pretense of dignity. Laborers would resort to desperate measures to find food, foraging for roots and berries, or even, in extreme cases, turning to cannibalism. The very act of eating, which should be a source of pleasure and communal bonding, became a grim, solitary struggle for survival, devoid of comfort or security. The miserable job of building the Great Wall was fundamentally rooted in the constant, agonizing battle against an empty stomach, a battle that countless individuals ultimately lost. Every stone laid, every section completed, was paid for, not just with sweat and blood, but with the silent, unseen suffering of chronic starvation. Last night, we confronted the relentless, agonizing grip of hunger and the constant struggle for meager food that tormented the great wall builders. Tonight, let's explore an even more pervasive and insidious killer that stalked the construction site's diseases' silent march. The rampant illnesses and terrifying lack of medical care that decimated the workforce, claiming lives far more efficiently than any barbarian raid. Because while the pickaxe and the whip broke bodies, sickness dissolved them from within, leaving no visible wounds, only a trail of silent, agonizing deaths. You are a laborer, your body already weakened by malnutrition, exhausted by endless toil, and constantly exposed to the brutal elements. This creates a perfect storm for illness. Imagine yourself amidst tens of thousands of conscripts, crammed into temporary, unsanitary camps scattered along the wall. There are no proper latrines, no clean water sources, and very little understanding of hygiene. Human waste, animal waste, and rotting refuse would accumulate, creating a breeding ground for every conceivable pathogen. This wasn't just unpleasant, it was a deadly, invisible enemy, lurking in every shadow, every mouthful of contaminated food, and every drop of unclean water. Waterborne diseases were rampant and utterly devastating. Dysentery, often referred to as the flux, would sweep through the camps like wildfire. Imagine experiencing uncontrollable, bloody diarrhea, severe abdominal cramps, and rapid dehydration. With no access to rehydration salts or modern medicine, your body would quickly waste away, your strength draining with every agonizing bout. Typhoid fever, another common killer, would bring on high fevers, relentless headaches, delirium, and internal bleeding. These diseases, contracted from contaminated water or food, would spread quickly through the crowded, unsanitary conditions, overwhelming the meager attempts at care. Whole sections of the workforce could be wiped out in a matter of weeks, leaving behind only graves and a lingering, putrid smell. Beyond digestive ailments, respiratory illnesses were a constant torment. The air was perpetually thick with dust from the dry earth, the quarrying of stone, and the constant pounding of rammed earth. Every breath was an assault on your lungs. Chronic coughs, bronchitis, and pneumonia were common, exacerbated by exposure to extreme cold in winter and the dampness of makeshift shelters. Imagine your lungs constantly burning, your chest tight, your breathing labored, all while being forced to perform grueling physical labor. This constant respiratory distress would weaken you further, making you susceptible to even more severe infections. And then there was epidemic disease. Historical accounts, though sparse on precise numbers, hint at devastating outbreaks of plague, smallpox, and other infectious diseases that could decimate the workforce in a matter of months. Imagine the terror as fever spreads through your crowded sleeping quarters, claiming one comrade after another. There's no isolation, no understanding of contagion, no vaccines, no antibiotic. The only solution was often to abandon infected sections, letting the disease burn itself out, leaving behind countless corpses. The living would often simply move on, knowing that the same fate could await them at the next camp. This was a silent, invisible war, fought and lost on countless fronts, against an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Historians often discuss the challenges of distinguishing specific diseases from historical accounts, but widely agree that infectious diseases were a primary cause of mortality. The lack of medical care was perhaps the cruelest blow. For the vast majority of laborers, a doctor was an unattainable luxury. If you fell ill or were injured, your only hope was a family member's crude home remedy, or perhaps the limited knowledge of a fellow conscript. There were no sterile instruments, no understanding of antiseptics, and limited knowledge of anatomy. Infections from even minor cuts or abrasions were common and often fatal, as the body, weakened by malnutrition, simply couldn't fight off the bacteria that thrived in the filthy conditions. A simple broken bone could lead to debilitating pain and permanent disfigurement if not set properly, making you incapable of work and thus condemned to starve. Condemned to. Even parasitic infections were a constant, debilitating presence. Without proper sanitation, hookworms, roundworms, and other intestinal parasites would be ubiquitous. Imagine the constant internal discomfort, the energy-sapping draining of nutrients from your already meager diet, leading to chronic weakness and anemia. These were not dramatic killers, but silent, pervasive tormentors, slowly eroding your vitality and making you more vulnerable to other diseases. Academics, through analysis of ancient burial sites, have indeed found evidence of widespread parasitic infections among populations of this era. The psychological toll of constant illness was immense. Imagine living with perpetual aches, fevers, and the knowledge that any minor ailment could quickly escalate into a life-threatening condition. The fear of contagion, the sight of your comrades succumbing to unseen enemies, would create an atmosphere of constant anxiety and despair. There was no escaping it, no safe haven. Your body was a battleground, constantly under siege, and the odds were stacked overwhelmingly against you. The Great Wall, in its majestic scale, often overshadows the immense human cost of its construction, particularly the millions who perished not from direct violence or accidents, but from the slow, agonizing march of disease. Every stone, every brick, every segment of rammed earth is quite literally imbued with the silent screams and dying breaths of countless individuals whose lives were extinguished not by a visible foe, but by the invisible agents of illness and the utter lack of care. The wall stands as a testament to imperial ambition, but also as a chilling monument to the relentless power of pathogens and the tragic indifference of a system that consumed human lives with an insatiable appetite. Last night, we confronted the invisible, yet relentless, march of disease that decimated the great wall builders, a silent killer far more efficient than any battle. Tonight, Let's explore the chilling reality of punishment's harsh hand, the brutal discipline, the constant surveillance, and the desperate, often futile, attempts at escape that defined the daily existence of these conscripts. Because while the elements and disease were merciless, the imperial system itself was an equally unforgiving tormentor, designed to crush dissent and extract every last ounce of labor. You are a laborer, your body aching, your stomach empty, your spirit worn thin by the ceaseless toil. But exhaustion or illness is no excuse. The imperial overseers, often former soldiers or ruthless officials, are omnipresent, their eyes scanning the lines of workers for any sign of weakness or insubordination. Their authority is absolute, their methods designed to instill terror and ensure unquestioning obedience. This isn't a factory foreman. This is a direct extension of the emperor's iron will, and their word is law, often backed by a literal whip. Imagine the atmosphere, a pervasive sense of fear and anxiety. Every swing of your pickaxe, every lift of a stone, is performed under duress. You constantly glance over your shoulder, terrified of being singled out. A moment of hesitation, a dropped tool, or a slight slowing of your pace could invite immediate and brutal retribution. The crack of a whip, the thud of a cudgel against flesh, and the pained cries of a fellow laborer are common sounds, grim reminders of the consequences of not meeting the impossible demands. This constant threat of physical violence would be a relentless psychological burden, far heavier than any stone you lifted. Historians widely cite the brutal discipline as a primary factor contributing to the high mortality rates on the wall. The forms of punishment were varied and agonizing. For minor infractions, slacking off, talking too much, or simply appearing too tired, you might face public floggings, inflicted with whips made of leather or braided cords. Imagine the searing pain, the humiliation of being beaten in front of your peers, your raw skin tearing, knowing that any wounds would quickly fester in the unsanitary conditions. These beatings were not just to inflict pain, they were a public spectacle, a deterrent designed to instill fear in all who witnessed them, a chilling reminder of the imperial power. More severe infractions, such as attempting to escape, stealing rations, or outright defiance, could lead to even more horrific fates. You might be subjected to mutilation, such as having a hand or foot amputated, rendering you useless for work and condemned to a slow, agonizing death from infection or exposure. Or you might face branding, a searing hot iron pressed onto your skin, leaving a permanent mark of your transgressions, a visible sign of your dishonor. These punishments were designed not just to incapacitate, but to utterly dehumanize, stripping away your dignity and turning you into a cautionary tale for others. And then there was the ultimate punishment, death. This could come swiftly, a swift blow from an overseer's sword, or a public execution designed to send a chilling message. Or it could be a slower, more agonizing demise, such as being left to starve, exposed to the elements, or even, according to some historical accounts, being buried alive within the wall itself. While historians debate the literal truth of millions buried inside the wall, it is a well-established fact that countless bodies were interred in its foundations or nearby, making the wall a de facto mass grave. This grim reality contributed to the wall's notorious nickname, the longest cemetery in the world. Imagine knowing that your final resting place might be beneath the very stones you were forced to lay, a grim irony for a structure meant to protect the living. The constant surveillance made escape nearly impossible, and incredibly perilous. You were thousands of miles from home, in unfamiliar and often hostile territory. The wall stretched for unimaginable distances, and every segment was patrolled by vigilant guards. If you managed to slip away from your work gang, you would face the brutal wilderness, the lack of food and water, and the constant threat of being hunted down by imperial patrols who would show no mercy. Imagine the desperation of such an attempt, knowing the odds were stacked impossibly against you, but driven by a primal urge for freedom. A failed escape meant almost certain torture and death, often as a public example. This stark reality meant that most laborers, despite their misery, chose the agony of continued toil over the near certainty of a horrific end. The psychological impact of this brutal discipline was profound. It fostered a pervasive sense of hopelessness and despair. There was no light at the end of the tunnel, no real prospect of release, only endless toil under the constant threat of violence. This systematic stripping away of dignity and autonomy broke spirits, turning once vibrant individuals into hollow shells, simply existing from one agonizing moment to the next. The system was designed to dehumanize, to strip away identity and replace it with obedience, transforming free citizens into disposable tools for imperial ambition. Academics often discuss the psychological concept of learned helplessness in context of extreme forced labor, where individuals cease to resist due to the overwhelming control exerted over them. The Great Wall, while standing as a symbol of human perseverance, is also a stark reminder of the darkest aspects of imperial power and the depths of human suffering. Every imposing watchtower, every long stretch of stone is steeped in the history of forced labor, brutal discipline, and the desperate, often final, screams of those who built it. The wall was not just a defensive barrier, it was a vast, open-air prison, a testament to the ruthless efficiency of a system that valued its own continuation far above the lives of the millions it consumed. The enduring structure whispers tales not only of military strategy, but of the unbearable misery of those who were its very foundation. Last night, we faced the brutal reality of punishment and the constant threat of violence that hung over the great wall builders. Tonight, let's explore an equally agonizing, yet often silent, form of suffering, the profound isolation and longing for distant homes that plagued these conscripts, torn from their families and thrust into a desolate, unfamiliar world. Because while the chains might be invisible, the emotional bonds that tied them to their past lives were constantly strained, leaving a deep, unhealing ache in their hearts. You are a laborer, perhaps from a fertile valley hundreds or even thousands of miles away, a place where the air smells of rice paddies or blooming plum trees, not dust and rock. You might be from what is now modern-day Georgia, a farmer accustomed to the slow rhythm of the seasons, or a merchant from a bustling city like Chicago, used to the comforting cacophony of crowds. Now, you stand on a remote, windswept mountain pass, surrounded by strangers, utterly cut off from everything familiar. The sheer geographic separation from your home is immense, an emotional chasm that no bridge could span. Imagine the journey itself to the wall. For many, it was a forced march that could last for months, traversing vast, desolate landscapes. Each step took you further away from your family, from your ancestral lands, from the familiar faces and comforting routines of your village. There was no way to send letters, no telegraph, no guaranteed return. Once you were gone, you were truly gone, a ghost to those you left behind. This forced severance from your roots would be a profound psychological trauma, leaving you feeling adrift and utterly alone in a hostile world. The lack of communication was absolute. Your family back home would have no idea if you were alive or dead, if you were suffering, or even where you were located along the thousands of miles of the wall. Conversely, you would live with the gnawing uncertainty about their well-being. Were they safe? Had the harvests been good? Had disease swept through your village? This perpetual state of unknowing, this inability to send or receive a single message, would breed constant anxiety and a deep, unresolvable longing. Imagine the silent tears shed at night under the cold, indifferent stars as you yearned for a glimpse of a familiar face or the sound of a loved one's voice. Even among the other laborers, true connection was difficult. While you might form fleeting bonds with those in your immediate work gang, the sheer diversity of the conscripted workforce meant that many spoke different dialects, came from different regions, and held different customs, language barriers, cultural differences, and the pervasive sense of fear and competition for meager resources often prevented the formation of deep, lasting friendship. You were surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone, a solitary soul adrift in a sea of suffering. This forced isolation, even in a crowd, exacerbated the emotional toll of separation from home. The loss of identity also contributed to this feeling of isolation. You were no longer Farmer Lee or Scholar Chen. You were a number, a nameless body in an endless line of laborers. Your individual story, your personal history, your hopes and dreams were utterly irrelevant to the imperial machine. This systematic dehumanization stripped away your sense of self, leaving you feeling invisible, a ghost in your own life. Imagine the profound despair of having your very existence reduced to a unit of labor, your individuality erased by imperial decree. Academics often discuss the psychological impact of such profound de-individualization in context of forced labor. The unfamiliarity of the landscape was another constant reminder of your displacement. You were building a wall across mountains, deserts, and steppes that were utterly alien to you. The unfamiliar flora and fauna, the vast, empty expanses, and the often extreme weather patterns would contribute to a sense of being an outsider, a temporary inhabitant in a world that did not welcome you. There was no comforting landmark, no familiar path to remind you of home. Every horizon was a reminder of how far you were from everything you knew and loved. And the cultural shock, if you were from a distant southern province, the customs, food, and even the language of the northern overseers and local populations would be unfamiliar, adding another layer of alienation. You might find yourself unable to communicate your needs, misunderstood, or subjected to prejudice. This cultural displacement, coupled with your dire circumstances, would amplify your sense of loneliness and vulnerability. It's like being dropped into a foreign country with no passport, no money, and no understanding of the language. But with the added misery of forced labor, the dream of returning home was often the only thing that kept many laborers going. A fragile, desperate hope that fueled their aching bodies. Imagine clinging to the memory of your family's faces, the taste of your local food, the sound of your village's festivals. These memories would be both a source of solace and a torment, a constant reminder of the life you had lost. But as the years dragged on, as more and more comrades succumbed to the wall's insatiable appetite, that hope would slowly, inexorably, begin to fade, replaced by a grim resignation. The wall was not just a barrier against invaders, it was a barrier against return, a physical manifestation of the empire's power to sever bonds and erase futures. The profound isolation and longing for home were unspoken, unacknowledged forms of torture, inflicting wounds that no balm could heal. The Great Wall, while a marvel of engineering, stands as a chilling monument not only to physical suffering, but to the profound emotional anguish of millions of individuals torn from their lives, forced to labor in a desolate land, forever yearning for the comforting embrace of a home they would never see again. Its imposing stones whisper tales of forced separation and the enduring, heartbreaking human need for belonging. Last night, we explored the silent anguish of profound isolation and the longing for distant homes that plagued the great wall builders. Tonight, we face the grim, undeniable truth that underpins every stone and every watchtower, the wall of the dead, realizing the immense human cost and the horrifying, often anonymous, fate of countless laborers whose lives were consumed by this monumental project. Because while the wall stands as a symbol of imperial might, it is, in a very real sense, the world's longest cemetery. You are a conscript, witnessing firsthand the relentless attrition. Day after day, bodies fall, some collapse from sheer exhaustion, their muscles giving out, their hearts simply ceasing to beat under the impossible strain. Imagine watching a comrade, perhaps a man you shared your meager rations with, suddenly crumple to the ground, his last breath a wheezing gasp. There's no time for mourning, no pause for respect. His body is simply removed, often unceremoniously, to clear the way for the work to continue. The grim efficiency of death on the wall is horrifyingly apparent. Others succumb to disease, the silent killer we discussed previously. Dysentery, typhoid, pneumonia, and various fevers sweep through the crowded, unsanitary camps, taking lives in agonizing succession. Imagine waking to find the man next to you cold and unresponsive, his face pale and drawn from a fever that raged through the night. The symptoms would be familiar, the outcome predictable. There's no medicine, no proper care, just the slow, inevitable progression of illness until the body finally gives up. These deaths, often quiet and unseen amidst the daily clamor, were arguably the most pervasive cause of mortality on the wall. Historians widely cite disease as the leading cause of death, far outstripping accidents or direct violence. Then there are the accidents. The work itself is inherently perilous. Imagine the constant threat of falling from a great height on a sheer mountain slope, or being crushed by a runaway stone, a snapped rope, a crumbling scaffold, a misstep on loose terrain. Any of these could lead to instant, brutal death, or perhaps a limb is caught between two massive stones, leading to a slow, agonizing demise from internal injuries and infection. These violent deaths, often public and shocking, served as grim warnings, reinforcing the constant fear that permeated the construction sites. The sight of a body tumbling down a precipice, or lying mangled beneath a fallen block, would be etched into your memory, a terrifying reminder of your own precarious existence. And what about those who tried to escape? We touched upon it, but the brutal reality of a failed escape often meant a protracted, agonizing end. If caught, you faced torture, mutilation, and often a public execution designed to deter others. Imagine the public display of a dismembered body or a head impaled on a pike, a chilling message to any who dared to defy imperial will. These weren't just punishments, they were theatrical displays of power, meant to crush any flicker of hope or rebellion. The burial practices, or lack thereof, further highlight the dehumanization. For countless laborers, there were no proper funerals, no elaborate tombs. Their bodies were often simply interred near where they fell, in shallow graves along the wall's foundations, or in unmarked mass graves. The soil itself became a vast cemetery, absorbing the remains of millions. This grim reality contributed to the enduring legend that the Great Wall was literally built with human bones and blood, a chilling metaphor for the immense sacrifice. While historians debate the precise number of individuals literally buried within the wall's structure, the overwhelming consensus is that the surrounding areas served as a vast, undocumented burial ground for the vast workforce. The sheer scale of death is almost incomprehensible. While exact figures are impossible to ascertain from ancient records, conservative estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands, and more likely, millions, perished during the various construction phases of the Great Wall over centuries. This wasn't a single project with a single death toll. It was a continuous, multi-dynasty effort, each phase demanding its own horrific tribute in human lives. The wall represents one of the largest death tolls of any single construction project in human history. Imagine standing on a completed section, looking out over the endless miles, knowing that beneath your feet, and within the very stones you helped lay, lie the remains of countless forgotten individuals. The anonymity of these deaths is perhaps the most poignant tragedy. Very few individual laborers' names are recorded. They died as nameless conscripts, their lives reduced to a statistic in an imperial ledger, their personal stories lost to the sands of time. Their sacrifice was immense, but their individual identities were erased, a chilling testament to the indifference with which the empire viewed its human resources. This collective anonymity further underscores the dehumanizing nature of the project, reducing vibrant lives to mere building materials. Academics continue to attempt to humanize these nameless laborers through archaeological and historical research, trying to piece together their fragments of existence. The Great Wall, in its majestic beauty and incredible scale, is inextricably linked with this dark history. It is not just a defensive barrier, it is a monument to suffering, a symbol of extreme human endurance, and a chilling reminder of the lengths to which empires would go to secure their power. Every brick, every watchtower, every mile of its winding length holds the silent, untold stories of those who built it, their lives consumed by an insatiable imperial ambition. The wall truly stands as a wall of the dead, a testament to the anonymous millions whose sacrifice formed its very foundation. Last night, we confronted the grim reality of the Wall of the Dead, acknowledging the immense and often anonymous human cost embedded within the Great Wall's very foundations. Tonight, as we near the end of our journey, let's explore how, despite the vast passage of time and the silencing of so many voices, echoes of their suffering are etched into the stones themselves, a silent, enduring testament to the misery of its builders that persists to this very day. Because while the human memory might fade, the wall remembers. You stand today at a section of the Great Wall, perhaps at Badaling or Mutianyu, marveling at its scale. You see the perfectly laid bricks, the imposing watchtowers, the winding path over mountains and through valleys. But if you look closer, if you allow yourself to truly feel the history emanating from those ancient stones, you can discern the faint, heartbreaking whispers of the millions who built it. The wall is not just a structure of stone and mortar, it is a monumental, open-air archive of human suffering, written in the very materials that compose it. Consider the irregularity of the stone and brickwork in some sections. While later dynasties refined techniques, earlier faces, built under immense pressure and with minimal resources, often show inconsistencies. You might spot crudely shaped stones, hastily mortared together, or sections where the angles are slightly off, hinting at the exhaustion, the desperation, and the sheer speed with which the laborers were forced to work. These imperfections are not flaws in construction, they are signatures of suffering, mute testimonies to the human limits pushed beyond endurance. Historians studying specific wall sections often find varying construction quality directly correlating with periods of intense forced labor and high mortality. Then there are the ghosts of their tools. Imagine the simple, brutal implements they used: heavy mallets for ramming earth, crude chisels for quarrying stone, basic baskets for carrying earth and rock. While these tools themselves have long since corroded or turned to dust, their mark remains. The uneven surfaces of some stones, the chipped edges, the distinct patterns left by ancient ramming techniques, these are the direct imprints of their relentless labor. You can almost feel the calluses on their hands, the strain in their backs, as you trace the lines left by tools wielded by desperate, aching bodies. The wall is literally shaped by their toil. The sheer logistics of material transport also leave invisible, yet powerful echoes. Imagine the weight of those massive stones, some weighing hundreds or even thousands of pounds, dragged for miles up treacherous slopes, the deep gouges on ancient rock surfaces, the flattened earth of old transport paths, the faint remnants of primitive ramps. These are silent narratives of incredible physical exertion, of human muscle stretched to its breaking point. When you see a perfectly placed enormous stone today, understand that it wasn't placed by machine. It was positioned by the combined, agonizing force of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of human beings. And consider the inhospitable landscapes through which the wall winds, the barren mountain peaks, the unforgiving deserts, the desolate steppes. These places speak of isolation, extreme weather, and scarcity. The wall itself, stretching across these formidable terrains, forces you to remember the constant battle against nature, the freezing winds that bit at exposed skin, the scorching sun that sapped strength, the parched earth that offered no water. The wall's location is not merely strategic, it is a constant, stark reminder of the environmental torment endured by its builders. Academics have mapped the wall's construction against geographical features, emphasizing the incredible logistical challenges this posed. The endless watchtowers and signal stations dotting the wall also serve as chilling reminders. While built to protect against invaders, they also symbolize the omnipresent surveillance over the laborers. Imagine being constantly watched, knowing that any perceived weakness or defiance would be met with swift, brutal punishment. The very design of the wall, with its strategic points for observation, hints at its dual purpose defense against external threats and control over its internal workforce. The silent, watchful gaze of these towers extends not just outward, but inward, over the vast human effort. Even the legends and folklore surrounding the wall carry echoes of suffering, tales of laborers buried alive within its foundations, or of heartbroken wives weeping at its base, leading to sections crumbling in sympathy. These are not just fanciful stories, they are cultural memories, oral histories that, while perhaps exaggerated, capture the deep-seated trauma and human cost associated with the wall's construction. These legends, passed down through generations, ensure that the misery of the builders is never entirely forgotten, a powerful lament woven into the very fabric of Chinese heritage. Historians consider such folklore invaluable for understanding the popular perception and memory of historical events. The most poignant echo, perhaps, is the anonymous mass graves that lie beneath and alongside vast sections of the wall. While archaeologists do not find millions of bodies literally inside the wall, countless human remains have been discovered in its vicinity, testament to the immense mortality rates. These unmarked burial sites are the most direct, chilling evidence of the human toll. They are silent cemeteries, stretching for thousands of miles, each anonymous grave a heartbreaking reminder of a life consumed by imperial ambition. The very ground you walk on, admiring the wall, may be the final resting place for dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of forgotten souls. The Great Wall of China, therefore, is more than just a historical monument. It is a profound, enduring symbol of human endurance, yes, but also of unparalleled misery. The echoes of suffering are not just in textbook or dusty archives, they are etched into the very stones, carried on the winds that sweep across its battlements, and whispered in the local legends. It stands as a powerful, silent sentinel, reminding us of the human cost of empire, the fragility of individual lives in the face of absolute power, and the indelible mark that immense suffering leaves on the landscape of history, forever calling us to remember the untold stories of those who built the longest cemetery in the world. Last night, we heard the silent screams etched into the very stones of the Great Wall, enduring echoes of the builders' profound suffering. Tonight, As our journey through the miserable job of building the Great Wall of China comes to its quiet close, let's allow the sleepy mountain's embrace to settle over us. We'll consider the wall's final, quiet rest, the untold stories it still holds, and the enduring, often melancholic beauty it now possesses, long after the human cost has faded into legend. Because while its past is dark, the wall now stands as a vast, silent sentinel of history, holding secrets whispered only by the wind. You stand today upon a remote, overgrown section of the Great Wall, far from the bustling tourist sites. The wind whispers through crumbling battlements, carrying the faint scent of pine and ancient dust. The harsh cries of overseers and the groans of laborers have long since faded, replaced by the chirping of insects and the distant call of a hawk. The once blood-soaked stones are now softened by moss and lichen, gently reclaimed by the very nature that once tormented its builders. This isn't a monument to fear anymore. It's a testament to time, a colossal ribbon of stone slowly dissolving back into the earth from which it was so brutally torn. Imagine the vastness of this structure, stretching for thousands of miles across mountains, deserts, and plains. Each segment, each brick, each rammed earth layer holds a fragment of a forgotten life. The wall itself has become a giant, silent storyteller, its weathered stones preserving tales of imperial ambition, human resilience, and unimaginable suffering. You might close your eyes and feel the coolness of the ancient stone beneath your hand, and for a moment you can almost hear the faint echoes of footsteps, the distant clang of tools, the soft sigh of exhaustion. It's a vast library of untold narratives, waiting for the wind to whisper their secrets to those who pause and listen. The wall's presence today is a constant, physical reminder of the immense scale of human endeavor and the often dark motivations behind it. It prompts us to reflect not just on the grandeur of ancient empires, but on the profound ethical questions raised by forced labor and the disregard for individual human life. It forces us to ask, at what cost does progress truly come? This enduring monument, in its very existence, compels a silent contemplation of the balance between collective achievement and individual sacrifice, a debate that historians continue to engage with. Yet, despite its grim origins, the Great Wall has acquired a new kind of serene beauty. As it winds its way across undulating hills and dramatic mountain ridges, it blends seamlessly with the natural landscape, almost like a natural feature itself. The relentless human effort of construction has, over centuries, been softened by the gentle hand of nature. Trees now grow within its crumbling sections, wildflowers bloom in its crevices, and animals make their homes within its hollowed-out towers. It's a powerful visual metaphor for the triumph of nature over even the most formidable human constructions, and a quiet promise of renewal. The wall also represents the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the unimaginable misery, the constant hunger, the brutal punishments, and the pervasive disease, the laborers continued to build. Their collective endurance, their sheer will to survive another day, is embedded in every stone. This monument is not just to the emperors who commanded its construction, but to the anonymous millions who built it, a silent tribute to their incredible, if unwilling, perseverance. It stands as a testament to humanity's capacity for both immense suffering and unimaginable endurance. Today, the Great Wall draws visitors from all corners of the globe, a universal symbol of human history and architectural genius. While most come to marvel at its scale, some, perhaps like you, will feel the deeper, more melancholic resonance of its past. It serves as a stark historical lesson, reminding us of the importance of human rights, fair labor, and the value of individual lives, lessons painfully learned over centuries. It's a physical embodiment of a past that we must remember, not to glorify, but to understand and to prevent from ever being repeated. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, peaceful shadows over the ancient stones, the great wall settles into its nightly slumber. The winds, once harsh and biting, now carry a softer whisper, a lullaby woven from centuries of history. The cries of the laborers are long gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the world. The wall, now bathed in the gentle moonlight, seems to breathe a sigh of ancient relief, its monumental task complete, its stories finally at rest. May the quiet strength of these ancient stones and the profound echoes of the lives that shaped them bring a deep and peaceful sleep to you tonight.